Hey, everybody, and welcome back to the Pardonable Podcast. This is episode 47, and I got a wonderful guest coming on tonight. But before I get started, I wanted to do a thing where I started doing like a charity for the month. So this month's charity is actually the same as last month's, but I started it a little bit late. Um, let me see if I can pull it up real quick. I'm still trying to get better at this. Oh man, I appreciate you tuning in. Anyway, the charity this month is lucasfund.com. And Lucas is a friend of mine who got adopted into a family that's real close to us. And he's got a few things that he needs for the household, like a ramp to get in. And since they're close friends with us, I know where the money is going and what it's going to. And it's a really good cause. And so I just wanted to shout them out for my charity of this month. It's lucasfund.com. If you want to give anything, you can go there and check it out. It's a cool time. But yeah, and I'll be doing that for the whole month coming up. So it's lucasfund.com. Go there and give. But anyway, I wanted to put that right up at the front because I don't want to wait to the very end, especially in case I forget. And I've been really trying to be diligent about sharing stuff like that and not just trying to sell my t-shirts. But anyway, this week I have a very special guest. He's an artist and an illustrator. I've known him for quite a while. I've actually followed him and his work before I ever met him. And then I happened to run into him in San Antonio and did a few shows with him. And but so it's going to be a really great conversation. My guest tonight is Taco Boy himself, Eddy Rios. Did I say that right, Eddie? Oh,
yeah, Eddy Rios.
Yeah, okay. Rios. I feel like I say it extra white though. Like it's an extra white way.
It's all fine. It's all good.
Thanks, man. I'm still, like I said, the video thing's a little bit new, so I'm still struggling, especially with the screen pull up of trying to share my screen. Right. I'm sure there's like an easy, one click thing where you just hit a button on your keyboard. Right. I haven't figured that part out. I'm just flipping through the manual as I'm trying to do it. Right. But anyway, man, thanks for joining me tonight. I've got a few questions, and I just want to talk and pick your brain. But the one I wanted to start off. Well, I tell you what. Do you want to introduce yourself? Do you have anything? Artist and illustrator. What else you got going
on? Yeah. So I pretty much do traditional watercolor, also digital. Do anything from pop culture, anime, sometimes just random silliness, animals. Yeah. I pretty much just try to do stuff that I either love or enjoy seeing.
Very cool. Yeah, actually, the first time I found you was on Instagram, and one of the things that pulled me because you're really deep into the nerd culture, and yes. I'm too. Like I love that stuff. But one of the things that really caught me off guard is because you did watercolor, and I was like, no one does watercolor, and especially not like this.
Yeah.
And so you came out of nowhere for me. I was like, this is awesome. So I followed, and then I didn't realize that you lived in San Antonio, and then when we moved to San Antonio, it was a cool experience. I ran into you, I think at like Brick, or I don't remember how I got ran into you doing art shows. Yeah, but it was most likely that. But man, how did you get started? Because I have this question. Because it's a little bit weird for me, and I always look at, because you've been doing it for a really long time, and I was like, what made you go like, this is what I want to do?
It all had to start since when I was 8 or around there, whatever age I was at second grade. Yeah. I pretty much got inspired by a substitute teacher. For that day we were drawing, and I drew I think a dragon and a knight. And she said it looked good and I should continue drawing. So then I started making like these small little cartoons. And around that time, Street Sharks and Ninja Turtle were popular. So I started making my own kind of the in-between, like Street Sharks and Ninja Turtle kind of type thing. And so I was like making comic books of this, and I still remember it. And I think I told myself, I know what the characters look like back then, so I want to draw them, but as my own skill now to see what it would look like. But it was pretty much like this Rambo rabbit kind of looking guy, like shirt off, bullets running all across. Machine heavy, and then the other guy was a fish. But I think that one came from Street Sharks. He had a drill on his nose, and so he was like more of the techie guy kind of thing. Right.
Were you a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle kid growing up?
Yeah, I was.
Yeah, me too. Though I think that might have been my own. That might have been the cartoon for me. I don't. I got into a little bit of the other stuff, but really, if I think back, like it was pretty much all. Even my toys, man. That was like all my toys was just
Yeah.
Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
Um, I never really went anywhere else. Like I have friends who are really into Masters of the Universe, and since that was a reboot here recently, it's like, oh, it's like nostalgia. I was like, I never
Yeah.
watched that as a kid, and a lot of those cartoons. And then I think I don't know how old you are, but I was too old for Power Rangers when they came out. I think I'm too old, whatever.
Yeah.
But I missed it. Like I just was right over the peak. So I never was a Power Rangers kid. It was just Ninja Turtles, man. And I don't remember having much else other than like X-Men. Um, and yeah, might have been it. I'm trying to think of my Saturday mornings. Do you remember your Saturday mornings
Yeah, I
growing up?
remember Saturday mornings. To me, it was Power Rangers. So,
It was Power Rangers.
um,
Okay, yeah.
I think the level as that I remember vividly was Ninja Turtles, and I think Batman around that time because I was born in '87. So,
Okay,
uh,
yeah, yeah.
Batman, and then Power Rangers came in. And I remember collecting pretty much anything I tried to get. What my mom was able to afford or family was able to afford during that
Yeah.
time. Um, But yeah, I remember that was a whole different thing. Then I think I fell in love with big bad Beetleborgs, and then that
Okay, yeah,
kind of
yeah.
I guess it was good. It was back then, and it kind of stopped. So Barn
Yeah.
just kept going and going.
It really, and I think it's like still going. It's still a whole big fan base for that.
It still is. It's
Beetleborgs, man. I
crazy.
think instead I leaned towards the Transformer route. I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure that's where I end up going because that majority of my stuff growing up toys. Oh, and this is a weird side note, but you have a daughter, so you probably know this. I never paid attention because I don't have kids, and I never really, unless it's like Christmas and I'm buying something for my nieces or something like that.
Right.
But I always forget how stupid expensive toys are, and I have no idea how they get away with that. Like,
Yeah. Some of them
I,
are.
I'd never like growing up in my 20s. I was like, that's like it's an action figure. It's probably like what $4. Oh,
Yeah.
things like 15. And you're like,
Yeah.
why is this? So
Yeah.
anyway, that's a dumb rant, but I realized that the other day we were buying a gift for a birthday, and I was looking. I was like, how do parents survive?
Yeah.
Like,
Exactly.
how do they
Yeah.
do this?
And then
Be
you get
nothing
into
but
video games, and that's just a
yeah.
whole other
Is
thing. Yeah.
that better though? Because then your credit card's getting racked up on Fortnite skins, and then you're like, well,
Yeah.
maybe I should have stuck with the action figures.
Because I do have an older son. He's 15. He just turned 15, and he is a gamer. So every now and then he'd be like, "Hey, he plays Call of Duty. He's like, "Hey, I need $20 because I want to get this skin, or I need to get this gun layout."
Yeah, yeah.
So
Well, I mean, I guess it is kind of the new action figure thing, right?
yeah, pretty
Yeah, I
much
guess it pretty much is. Or
digital.
I guess he's 15, so it'd be like the new skateboards or
Yeah,
God, what did I buy when I was 15? I don't even remember. I don't really remember much around that time as far as toys.
I
Probably
think mine was
Legos.
skateboards.
It was yeah, I think mine was Legos. I think that was like a Lego phase I had for a while.
Yeah.
You know, and those things, we went to a Lego store and that was
Oh, that's a
ridiculously
whole
expensive.
yeah,
And then we went like 2 weeks ago. Weird side rant. We were going into the mall, and I saw this dad, and they had two giant like the Lego shop bags,
yeah,
and I was like, he's loaded. Like
yeah,
he's probably driving off
yeah,
in a Tesla or an Audi. Because there's no way you're going in there and not dropping at least $100
yeah.
on a small, on like the Harry Potter train. Like that's
Right.
a
Yeah,
$100. But man, that's cool that you started off when you were young. I I grew up drawing. I think, which is kind of weird too. I still have them. I made a comic book when I was a kid, probably around 9, 10 years old. I just started drawing. They weren't any good. I remember it was called Saberman. Um, and I think I just got the word saber from Star Wars, and I was like, this makes sense.
yeah,
And then I just drew like your normal comic book strips. They're terrible, not very
yeah,
good. But I for some that's like the one thing I've collected throughout my life. But I started, but I never really inclined myself to be much of an artist. It wasn't until I got like late teens. Actually, no, it would have already been in my 20s. I started messing around with art. Um, and I wish I would have nailed something down because I just started with abstracts on cardboards. Did you ever play around with a different medium type and a different theme,
yeah.
or is it
It
always
went
been
in
that?
phases because first it was like pencil, and then I got into black and white ink. I was doing ink, and then I went to some color pencils, And then from there, I think right out of high school, I was trying to find like that happy medium. I was good at just inking stuff, ballpoint or just a felt tip pen, and then I was like, hey, I'm gonna try acrylic, and I was like, yeah, it's good. And then I was like, I'm gonna try. I had a phase like for 1 year, I went from like acrylic to oil, hated oil,
Yeah,
and
I don't
then
like oil.
I
Not a
think
big
during
fan.
that time I was following, I guess, artists online. It must have been either Facebook or MySpace, one of the two. And I think I landed with Alex Party, and he was doing watercolor. And I was like, hey, that's pretty cool. I like the way it looks. So the way he was doing it was kind of like the same way I imagine it, doing the watercolor first and then ink on top.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So I tried it and I loved it. And I was like, oh, cool. So I have a watercolor palette that's just a generic brand from
Mhm.
Michaels. It's the one I've been using since forever.
Yeah, dude.
And
Yeah.
and I was like, okay, I can stick this in my backpack. It's not dirty. I don't have to clean up, put all 10, 20 bottles away, or 10 or 5. I was like, I'm not worried it's gonna splash in my backpack or anything. And it's just easy to take. So it's portable. So then I was like, "Yeah, I'm gonna do this." So that's what I end up using a lot.
That's actually pretty rad, and not many people know this unless they play around with art. But, watercolors, no one does it because I mean, this is for me and you, if we were in a closed room, I don't think anybody does it because it's super hard.
Yeah.
There's no like you make a mistake, it's done. You start all over again. There's no,
Right.
oh, I'll just paint over it or I'll move it around or I'll try. You really have to make it work for you. And your style's a lot different than mine. Like you're a little bit more precise. I'm a little bit more messy with my watercolor. Just because I know because I'm just not willing to give up on a pace like a page because of mistake. I'm just like, no, I'll work it in somehow. Um,
Yeah.
but I do like how compact it is. I think that was one of the reasons why I started. Actually, the first time I thought about watercolor, and this is kind of why I asked you that because I was wondering. I started like this is acrylic behind me, and I started doing stuff like that, and then I realized that on canvases I wanted it to flow a little bit more, so I started actually watering down my acrylics, and then I got to the point where they were just so watery, and then someone was like, "Have you ever watercolored?" And I was like, "No, like who watercolors?" Um,
Yeah.
I was like, "What am I for? This is
Yeah.
art. I'm an artist. What are you talking
Yeah.
about?" Um, and then I did what you did. I was like, "Well, I am watering. Let me try some." So I went and got you the generic one, and dude, I still have that same generic. Michael's like, here's your colors and play with.
Yeah.
Um, I still have that. I still have most of those watercolors too. But once I found it, I was like, this just looks different and it feels different,
Right.
and it's really cool, man. I enjoy watercolor. It's definitely my favorite. But you've also moved into graphic design too.
Yeah,
Um,
I got addicted to that, and I I still feel there's this feeling with watercolor that outperforms doing it digitally.
okay.
Because when I do a watercolor and I see it, I'm like, man, that looks. I don't know why, but it looks amazing. I don't know if it's just like there's just strokes, and I don't know,
Yeah.
maybe just putting down like, hey, this is like something more robust. But I like digital just for the simplicity of it. Carrying it around, pop it out. You had to
Yeah.
design, sketch it, work on it on the bed, work on it everywhere. And I think that's why I liked watercolor at that point. But then it went to digital, and since I'm working in my comic book, I have to know the mechanics of being a digital artist, and
Yeah.
I love it. And right now, and I kind of went from Photoshop to I actually use Illustrator after high school, and then Photoshop, and then Procreate is what I'm using now.
Oh, very cool. Yeah, yeah.
And and I don't know, Procreate, I love it. It's just simplified version of Photoshop. I still use Photoshop as for heavy lifting, but that's where
Yeah.
I'm at on that one.
I might have to. My wife has Procreate. She did a lot of photography, and so she had Procreate just to kind of edit photos and stuff. And I've really considered like, should I try to sit down and do digital? But I'm so handicapped when it comes to doing anything tech. It makes me nervous, and so I'm like,
Yeah,
I
I
don't
would
know
I
if I
would I
should try
would
it.
highly recommend. I even taught my fiance Procreate. Like, she didn't know anything. She did traditional, and and she wasn't an avid like artist full time or part time. She just did it as a hobby, and she's like, "Hey, I want to try." And I was just like, "It's easy. Like, try it." I was like, "I'll buy the iPad. If you don't like it, we return it like in
Yeah,
a
yeah,
week." You know, I was like, "The program's only $10, so it's not like we're only gonna lose $10." I told her, "If you
yeah,
love
yeah.
it, then you can enjoy it." She tried it and she loves it, and she's run with it, and she's actually improved within a year. You could see a difference from what she was creating her first start to that. But they also have there are certain artists and certain packs out there that sell like watercolor textures, and I noticed that
Okay.
I can make it look if I did watercolor and like mixed media together. And so I
Yeah,
even
yeah.
got commissioned. Someone's like, "Hey, can you do watercolor? But I need it digital because I need a PNG file." And I was like, "Yeah, I
Gotcha.
can do that." So I just did a barn really quick. So I was like, I can do it with that.
Do you think you're gonna move eventually into solely digital and just trust the
I feel like
paintbrushes to sell?
right now I'm pretty much 98% digital.
Oh, wow. Okay.
The 2% is just if I have the time. I think
Yeah.
it's time, what it does. And I even bought a new watercolor palette like 2 months ago, and I haven't tried it because I think I forgot what happened. I don't know if Michael's that I went to ran out, and I was like, "Oh, I'm just gonna order something off Amazon that had like 10 extra colors to the little circle thing." So I was like, "Let me try that. Maybe it can add more hue
Yeah,
to
yeah.
my colors." And I haven't even tried it out, and I'm like, I'm itching, but I might do it very soon because we have a art show coming up next Saturday for Disney. So I was
Oh,
like, maybe
rad.
I'll do
Okay.
something kind of fun and just simple, and that way I can get back into the watercolor.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the time part, man, that's the hardest. Even
Yeah,
me, like, I don't have a ton of responsibilities, but finding the time, it's a pain. And I can see, and that's kind of the appeal that I have, that where I'm like, "Well, do I wanna try digital?" Because, I can't tell you, even I was busy doing other stuff, so every time I take a step back from art, it's kinda like riding a bike, but you
mhm.
kinda have to brush the gears off a little bit when you get back into it.
Yeah,
And so I'm like, well, I've done this for years. I should be able to do this fine. And then I'll start and mess up and be like, no, I'll just start up, which is great for watercolor because it's not very expensive. It's not like
yeah,
you're going to break the bank if you throw paper away.
yeah,
But man, I went through like four and I just trashed it. I was like, this would have been so much easier if I could just erase this little part here and then moved it
yeah.
around. And I'm like, how much time? And then people always ask me, like, how long did that take you to make that piece? And I'm like, this piece or the six that I did trying to get here? Because
Yeah,
that is where all my time is how often did I mess up? Especially when it comes to the watercolor, because you always ink them after, right? You ink yours after you watercolor
yeah,
and
I
then
can
you
back
yeah.
after, yeah.
That's the same thing I do for mine. And you'll be like, this is great. And it doesn't take much to overshadow just one part. And you're like,
Right.
and it's ruined. And then let
Yeah.
me start over again.
Yeah.
And then
Especially if it bleeds over and you're like, "No, that's not what I wanted you to do."
oh, that's the worst. But again, that goes to the impatience thing. And everyone who's not a watercolorist, no one
Yeah.
cares. But for me, it's good to hear somebody else say stuff like that, because you know how many times where I've been like, all right, this is wet, but I'm kind of impatient. I just want to ink it now. And then you do it
Yeah.
and it bleeds in the color. And you're like, oh, if I would just waited till it was dry. And
Yeah.
so it's a real pain. I've gotten to the point where I'll have multiple pieces going at once. So I'll color and do like another layer of color or change something up, set on the shelf, let it dry, pull one that I've already done, color, start sketching and doing on that. And then kind of rotating them because I get impatient. Plus, if I steal 2 hours of my time in an evening, I kind of have to utilize it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't just, all right, there's 30 minutes of color and I'm going to wait 20 minutes for it to dry up a little bit.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I've got this amount of time. I got to pack as much as I can in.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's cool. When you started doing watercolor, how long did it take for you to get your bearings where you think you were good?
Um,
Because
it was messy at first. I would say I went super abstract. I would just throw random colors and then I would just do a black drawing, just like you're
yeah,
painting
yeah,
back there. It was kind of like that.
yeah, yeah.
And then I was like, okay, well then I refined it. And then Um, I started just combining. So most of my shading in my watercolor is done by marker, not the watercolor itself.
Mm.
So
Is it watercolor markers? Because I know they have those, or is it just mark?
it's just marker, Prisma marker.
Okay, yeah.
So I use
Yeah.
the gray, warm gray or cool gray, depending on what I'm trying to achieve. And so I've been using, they have like the percentage. So I've been using like 30, 40, and then sometimes
Hmm.
20% of the
Yeah,
hue.
yeah.
And then that kind of adds like a gradient of shading. And it's weird because when you do it, since I'm saying warm gray, it's not I'm putting gray to it. For some reason, when it goes on the watercolor, it kind of changes the hue of the color. So it's not really full gray. It's like an in between to make it look, if this was red, now it looks like maroon. So then it kind of,
Really? So the watercolor still is there, it bleeds in with it. So it
it
it just
blends with it.
shades
Yeah.
so it shades the watercolor. Man, I gotta write
Yeah.
this. I can't believe I've never messed with markers. So the only way I knew how to shade with watercolor is by going darker in the watercolor. Like
Exactly.
if it's a red, like I was like, well, I just gotta go a little bit darker. And if I want it lighter, then
A
obviously you
little bit
water it
black
down.
or
Oh yeah, add a
light
little
gray.
black to it to darken it and a gray. And so I've only done that. I never even thought about using a marker. You might just
Yeah.
change the game for me.
Yeah.
Appreciate that.
I got tips for watercolor, especially with I ran into bleeding a lot with
Hmm.
markers or pins. So then I
Yeah.
found the perfect one, which is Fabric Castell.
Really?
Um, they sometimes the page could be wet and it doesn't bleed. There might be like minor bleeding, but it's not like a full bleed. And sometimes it just goes through it,
Wow.
and the tip lasts for a good while. And they have actually like fat markers where usually when I do my bigger stuff, I'll do it with that,
Yeah,
and it
yeah.
works great because if I use Sharpie, for some reason, Sharpie, when there's water or if you go over it water, it kind of has like a weird black color. It's like a
Yeah.
black, bluish, or purple. It
Hmm.
kind of has that weird. When you look at it, it's just not pitch black. It's like some
There's a
weird
purple
like
in it. There's a
shine to it.
weird there's a
Yeah,
weird purple in it. When I would do like I needed thick before I even got into markers, I guess I'm a little bit behind on everybody. So I actually got India ink and I would have it in a jar. Like I don't remember if we used to
yeah,
do
yeah,
live shows and I would
yeah.
use different, thickness of brush and I would dip it in the
Right.
ink and that's how I would ink my stuff. Because Sharpie never would, because it would bleed and it would be purple. And I despised it. I was like, I hate that. And so I was like, well, I'm just gonna have to stick with doing, which it kind of had a cool like retro feeling, like kind of Victorian, like I'm over
Yeah.
here with a quill. Which I've done that too. That's
Yeah.
fun. I'm terrible at it, but that's kind of how it felt. Like it was a little bit, kind of punk rock. But man, it's not easy and it doesn't make your life easier, especially trying to do it on a paintbrush and ink certain things. Sometimes it works. Sometimes you get lucky.
The accident spill, and you're like, "Oh man!" I even had one time I had it on
Done
top
that.
of the paper canvas and a bloop, and I was like,
But
"Oh,
oh, you
yeah,
knocked it over.
yeah."
Oh, I've had it where it's dripped down the side because it's normally in a little jar.
Oh
Like I'll,
yeah,
I'll brush it
that
and it drip
too.
down the side, and I don't realize that it put a black ring on the bottom of the
Or if it's
jar.
not
And
dry and you're like drawing it, and you lift up your hand, and you're like, "Oh
oh,
dang it!"
oh yeah,
It's like, well,
yeah,
there you go. I have to go over it again. But yeah, I used to use India ink too, for the bigger stuff. I still do if I'm doing
yeah,
something like bigger black. Otherwise, if I'm lining, I'm doing the Fabric Castell markers or
yeah.
pins
I
because those
use
don't work.
I use the Prisma. That's is it Prisma? I can't see it from over here. I didn't pay attention. I got them from Michaels. You said Fabrica? Is that a
It's a
brand?
Fabercastell. So it's like
Okay.
Faber
I don't.
Castell.
I have no idea how to pronounce that. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So if that doesn't bleed, man, I'm gonna pick some of those up. The pens I have now are not bad. They've worked pretty good. But again, I'm just because I rotate, I never mess with anything that's still wet. Um, just because of the system that I came down with, I was like, I get impatient. When you
Same.
it's easy to be impatient when it comes to doing art stuff like this. And when we used to do so those listening and watching back in San Antonio, there used to be this is one of the reasons why I miss San Antonio so much is the art. Not that I despise where I am now, but there's those who don't know. I live in upstate New York, and I used to live in San Antonio, and the art scenes are completely different. Um, I wasn't sure how different they were till I got up here, and the art scene in San Antonio is so much more vibrant, so much more lively. The community behind it's phenomenal. Once you get to know one person, they introduce you to other artists, and there's constantly events going on. That might have something to do with it not being freezing cold half of the year, but
Yeah.
there's constantly
Yeah.
events going on. People, you used to put together events. I would do small events at bars, would just invite artists out. People were constantly doing stuff like
Yeah.
and inviting people out. And up here in upstate New York, it's not. I don't live in the right town for it. There's a few of them that are like that, but it doesn't have the same feel. There's not a community really for it, or there probably is, Eddie, and they're just not inviting me. That might be.
Right.
I might just not be invited.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, even I did an art gallery up here for a little bit and just try to kind of help this like move it forward. But everything I got from artists that came through, they're like, yeah, there's just nowhere to put our stuff up other than like coffee shops. And it blew my mind because it was just so much fun down in San
Right.
Antonio. Is it still like that, man? I always
Yeah.
like to have a San Antonio guest on so I can check in on the city.
Yeah, so the scene's pretty much it's either as that or it's grown because me and my fiance's are putting we do put on a show. We do pop culture shows and anime, so we
Oh, rad.
do this will be our third year for our kaiju anime and then our Ghibli Studio Ghibli as well. So those have been growing,
Yeah,
and the one we have next Saturday is Disney themed. It's our first one, so it's like anything Disney, Star Wars, Marvel, all that good stuff.
that's
So we're
cool.
kind of testing to see like how's San Antonio responding, but I feel like for some reason, and I don't have a reason why, but the anime art scene here in town is the thing that's taken over, and
Really?
it's like
Wow.
any those little art shows that we had at bars are now anime themed. There's like
Okay.
two of them that run every month or every other. There's one that runs every month, and there's one that runs every other month. And then there's conventions. We only had one anime convention. Now there's like four, I think.
Wow.
And so when we
Wow.
did it, we were trying to do it to kind of have like theme shows because they're just like a blanket like anime. And I was like, okay, well, let's just focus on what I like. So I was like, we do kaiju and then fiance like Ghibli. And so I was like, let's just mirror those two in. And then we do love Disney. We love a lot of Disney, and we're trying to see how that is. But we're noticing that for this show, since it's our first one, um, it's not picking up fast enough as the other two. So I'm like, I
Mhm.
don't know if that's because the whole anime market here is
It's
maybe
just taken over.
taking over.
Yeah.
But I was like, we'll see next Saturday. It's more of a fun test run just to have fun. But there are some artists I used to work with and paint way back in the day that are coming back. So
Very
hopefully
cool.
they come back, especially for our next show. But we have three of them this year, so we'll see how that goes.
So you have a few artists that come to these shows. They just specifically do stuff like that, like pop culture and nerd culture stuff, like
Yeah,
anime.
it's incredible because now there's a lot of artists that travel from Houston to Austin to San Antonio, sometimes
Oh,
to
that's cool.
Dallas. Like when we did our first kaiju anime event, we had over 120 people apply.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and that was it was tough, and it was around COVID too. So um we had already selected artists and then we had to stop it.
Yeah, yeah. That's
And
crazy.
but it was crazy because we had to go through all 120 and only select because it's brick. You can't fit
Yeah.
120 artists there. So I was like, we had to
No.
just mirror it down to 30. But it was hard because there was at least a good 65 to 70 like really strong
Wow.
artists, most of them that I never even heard of or seen. And I was like, and I was talking to my fiance, I was like, I don't know where these are coming from. Like I know who's in the scene or what they're doing, but I was like, maybe my niche is like my community is like smaller and there's like this bigger community here in San Antonio. And there was a lot of artists that I never heard of. And when I looked at their Instagram, I was just like, oh, they only have 100 followers, but I'm like, but dang, their art's like
Really good.
really, really good. And then eventually they're just coming out and doing stuff because I had friends leave their work and just do this full time, and I was like,
Wow.
okay, that makes more sense. And then with our Ghibli one, that was probably the most insane applicants we had, and I think that one outbeat kaiju. We had like it was almost close to it was like 180. And the same thing again, like we could only take 30, we did that. And but through the events, we started meeting artists from Houston, and then they introduced us to their community, which is pretty much anime too.
Yeah, yeah.
But I was like, oh man, their community is also different and cool. And I think is they have more. I guess because of the culture there, they have more Japanese community, and there's more. And I think that's where it feeds into that. There's like more choices of culture to
Yeah,
choose
yeah,
from.
yeah,
So it's
yeah.
cool what they're doing over there too. So it's a little bit different. There is the same community that we've seen. I think the one that probably died was bars.
Really.
I don't see what we used to see before. The only ones I see is just those anime theme nights, and that's pretty much it. Um,
I mean, if it
Brick
keeps
does his brick.
going, it's.
Yeah,
I mean, the brick kind of. I miss that place because that place was always doing something, and it was a wide range. Like it wasn't just. It's cool to know that they're doing themes now because even back then it was just like here's an art night, here's a night. And they would do a few things. I remember like they did a paper show, like an art show where they actually just did it was nothing but paperworks,
super.
like
Yeah,
watercolor, yeah, and that was always pretty cool. But other than that, there was like a few other places that I knew about, a little small galleries starting up. It's cool to hear that you're actually doing because I remember the events. It was like it was everything. It was everything goes from what I remember. Not everything, but it was a lot of cool different artists. Everyone
yeah,
had a completely different style, and we
yeah.
would just come together and do art shows. And it's cool that I cannot believe there's that many people into that kind of art that make it. I mean, number one, like people that are like, "This is what I want to buy," but that many people who make one specific genre of art that it's mind blowing. It also says a lot about how long I've been up here because
It does. Like it's insane. Like so we thought with Disney, I was like, okay, we should be getting like it was a lot harder, like very harder for Disney to reach the hundreds of applicants. I think for that one we had
that's so weird.
60.
I
And
would
I
have
in
went
my mind, I was
backwards.
like, okay, we shouldn't have the issue. And so what happened, which is the funny part, the people that did our shows that were anime artists were like, hey, we wouldn't mind doing that. We don't carry that art, but we can create that art.
Yeah,
And I was
yeah.
like, okay, so now I'm forcing them to bend their drum, their
Just
genre, which is
just do
fine.
do the anime style, but Disney. Like
Yeah, yeah,
just
that's what
Disney
they're
characters.
doing.
Is
And
that what
some
they're
of them
doing?
are
Yeah,
pulling
very
off
cool.
like amazing pieces that I was
I
just like,
bet.
oh man, this is cool to see. And that's what we wanted was to go to seeing like these unique artwork that they wouldn't see elsewhere
Yeah.
unless they're going to Disney and there's like an art festival over there. Um, and it's harder. And I think it was harder when we started walking around conventions, and we would majority of the time it was like almost 85% anime like artists, maybe a few sprinkle of a Marvel character here and there, and
Yeah.
we would see some Marvel stuff or Star Wars stuff, but it was almost rare, and it's just weird.
Wow.
So that's why I was just like, when we started doing it, I was like, I think there's just been like a crazy like popularity around anime out of nowhere, and I don't know. I'm like, to me, I'm like, this is catching me by surprise, but
Yeah. Yeah, I
it's
would have
just
never
cool.
picked up on that. I'm not much of an anime guy. A lot of my friends hate me for not watching it.
Yeah,
But I've never been an anime guy. I like the art, but that's because I like art. But I don't know how big that culture is. And if anything, I was like, well, it can't be more than Disney. That blows my mind that it's literally taking over everything else. Still really cool to hear that there is even something for that. And like up here, a lot of the art show, if I do like an art festival, they have a few festivals or like street festivals where artists come and put their stuff up, similar to what Brick would do. Um, and they do them once a year, and I would put out my comic book stuff. I was the only one. All the other, no one touches it. There's, I don't know anybody else who does it up here. I mean, I don't live in a giant town. I live in the capital of New York, but it's not giant.
yeah,
But it was weird to me because it's mostly just fine art. Like people, and I don't
yeah,
know if it's just the culture of, college, and they go to, work in there's a lot of museums around here and a lot of schools that teach fine art. I was like, you guys don't draw Spider-Man? Like
yeah,
just in your
yeah,
off time? You don't do
yeah,
that? And so,
exactly.
um, I might actually this year, and I would mix it in. I would have like my comic book stuff and stuff, and then I would have my fine art, like stuff behind and anything like that, my stencil watercolor stuff too. I think because this stuff is normally a totally different price range than my comic book stuff, because normally I make prints of that. This I can't really make a print. I mean, I could, but
Yeah,
it's not the same. And I realized every time I did those festivals, my prints and stuff like that would sell a lot more. And now that I'm thinking about, because I'm kind of the only person doing it, and so this year I think I'm going to do those festivals, but I'm just going to lean in heavy into the nerd culture stuff, and then leave my fine art stuff at home or put it up in a few places I can hang them, gallery style stuff, and just do that. I might lean heavily into it. Um, I would love to see that more up here. I'd love to do what you're doing down there up here. Maybe not the anime thing. That's a culture I have no idea.
Yeah.
They'd catch me as a fraud real quick. But
Yeah.
I would love to. I would love to see that. I miss San Antonio specifically because of the art community and the culture. That everybody was
I think for you,
participating.
there is one anime I would recommend because it kind of reminds me. Um, I know that you were into like the steampunk or gears and mechanics and
Yeah,
stuff like that.
I did that. Yeah.
There's one anime, and it's not really like flashy like other animes, but it's called Attack on Titan.
Oh, I heard about this. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
and
Apparently, it's
so
really good.
yeah, it's really dark. It's not for children.
Yeah.
It's really mature, but the story's amazing. But I also love when they throw in an idea and be like, "Hey, like that's really different. Like, where did you pop out that?" Because the people that fight these giants, they use these gears that are attached to them, and it basically shoots out spears that latch, and they kind of fly like not fly like Spider-Man, but they kind of like rope into Spider-Man kind of thing. But they have like the mechanical gears, and they all look like steampunk because the way it takes place is like they don't have mechanical cars, they have horses, but they have
Oh,
these
rad. Okay.
steam powered spears that shoots, and they have rope, and they can kind of grapple.
Okay,
And
that
then
would
they
be
also
right
have
up my
swords
alley.
that if the swords get dull, they just kind of load them back into their thing, and they call it an ODM gear. But there's all the twists and stuff into the story, and those twists really like messed with my mind
Really?
where I'm like, what happened? And like, because the story changes and then folds in on itself, and then it folds in on that self, and then you're like, holy crap, like what happened? Even my fiance was like, oh, I watched these because before between the season gaps, they were really long. I think between season 1 and season 2 there was like at least a 2 or 3 year gap.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
when she watched season 1, she was like, oh, season 1 was good, and then season 2 came out. I was like, I didn't really finish it because it kind of seemed kind of dull. But I was like, go back and watch it, because back then it was like we were on season 3. I was like, go back and watch it, and when we get to season 3, you're gonna see like the huge craziness. And because it makes you think like you already know the story, and then once you get to a point where there's subtle changes and you're like, wait, is that what I think it is? And then you see the change and you're like, they've been showing us this since the first episode. Why did I
Yeah.
miss this,
That's
um
that's the thing I heard about it. Maybe you can tell me about the anime, because that's the thing I hear about a lot is its storytelling is very in depth. More than you
yeah,
think, cuz when I first saw it, it was like, okay, just I mean, excuse my French, seemed like a cartoon. I
yeah,
just like the art style. It's like it's this particular. I just thought that was the difference. I was like, so this is an animated movie, just the art style is anime. But from what I keep hearing, like Attack on Titan, and I had a buddy of mine was like, dude, you gotta watch Ghost in the Shell, and he was like, you're
yeah,
gonna love it, you're gonna love it. So apparently that was another one that it's just really in depth, and the thing I kept hearing was like, they tackle like deep philosophical conundrums, like things that you would never
yeah,
normally think about,
exactly.
and I never knew any of this. And it's always cool to hear that it's not it's different, because you can apparently you can do a lot more with anime than you can normally do with even live action. And this is coming from guy does this is what these I'm just repeating all the things that people told me. Do you agree with that? Does that make more sense?
I would agree. There's some, especially with Attack on Titan, there's like this one scene where I think it's in season 3, where this guy's flying around in his gear, but the shots that they have are so dynamic, and I'm like, dang, how many frames did that take just to do that one
Yeah.
scene? Because it's amazing. But I mean, I was in the same boat. I didn't really I knew about anime, I watched some of it. I really didn't get heavily involved until around the time, this may have been like 5 6 years ago. My son, because I watched Dragon Ball Z and I just stopped, and I didn't watch the new version because I was like, oh, it's stupid, like they're
Yeah.
changing their hair color from blue red, and and all these other colors. I was just like, doesn't make sense. I was like, I went to the whole GT area, and I was like, okay, well, whatever, you know. And
Yeah,
so he's
yeah.
like, oh, come on, let's watch it, let's watch it, let's watch one. And I watched one. Okay, this is entertaining. And so we just watched it. It was just like a weekend thing. And then when we stopped, he was just like, I want to watch something else. What else can we watch? And then by around that time, I had met my fiance, and I asked her, and she was into it. She's like, "Oh yeah, you should watch the other one's called My Hero Academia," and she was like,
I've heard of that one too.
it's kind of like almost like it is superhero based, and so we watched that, and we're like, oh man, this is. I was like, wow, this is really good. I was just like, the story is way different from Dragon Ball Z, because Dragon Ball Z has a silliness and kind of like,
Yeah.
you know, the story is like, you know, you can do anything
Well,
with it and it'll be fine, you know.
it's built for a certain age group.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't. Yeah, it's dude. It's so hard for me to talk anime without. I have no idea if I'm stepping on people or not. I have no clue. Like, well, it's for kids, and people are like, "Oh, this guy's an idiot." You're gonna have to correct me in case I'm insulting your entire all your convention people.
Yeah.
Because I feel bad because I don't know much about it. But yeah, I always saw Dragon Ball Z as that like I'm friends were into. I was like, this is pretty. It was even for that age group. I think we were like 14.
Yeah.
Um, Pretty in-depth storytelling, even in Dragon Ball Z, from what I remember.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and so it only makes sense now that it's
And
the
it's improved. Like
animated
when I
stories are
compare the other animes to it, I was like, man, the stories the other ones can pull off is like makes it seem very little. Although that will always be one of my love animes because I grew up with it,
yeah, yeah.
franchise. So I think like, okay, that one's like at a pinnacle. But as far as other stuff that's coming out now, I think I enjoy watching that more than something live action. And
Why
I
can I
still love Marvel and stuff. And I know
can I
Marvel is like, yeah, but
I'm sorry, I interrupted you. Can I
no, no.
ask? Because I'm curious about. Can I ask you why? Why do you think you're more preferable towards anime than live action? Just because I'm curious. Because I think
Um,
I don't watch
there's
much.
shots, there's shots. I mean, there's animation studios. The way they do it, it almost looks like you're watching a live action, but it's animated. But very fast paced, octane kind of. There's some that go that way, but mainly the story that goes along with it. And I don't know if it's just more of our Western or American that we just have copy and paste kind of thing. Like there's not really like a big meaning to it, because some of these animes, I think after a while watching them, there is a kind of like a wireframe for the stories, and sometimes they tweak in and change it. But their main messages across from it is like more of like having that friendship,
Hmm.
um, inspiring one another. And I think that's where I clicked, was like, that's kind of like what I do. I want to inspire others, pull them up, you know, help them out. And that's the theme. If you watch more than
Okay.
one, you
Yeah.
start seeing that, and you're like, hey, that's cool. And then when you look at, like, let's say Spider-Man, I mean, he doesn't really have friends because he's
Yeah.
kind of like, hey, I'm my own thing, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then like if you start like going like Batman,
I
obviously
was about to say
solo,
Batman.
like
Same thing.
mostly
Yeah.
mostly all of them are solo unless it's like Teen Titans. But even in Teen Titans, you don't get that like, hey, you know what, like there's not that like, you're my friend and we should build on that to
Yeah.
like improve each other, or maybe just have a challenge, because there's some that challenge each other and they kind of like, he's like a rival within a group, and then they end up being really close friends, but he still kind of acts like a jerk. So it's kind of like Dragon Ball Z in a way, where it's Vegeta and he's like, okay, this guy's on their team, but he's like
Yeah.
like going off to the side of it.
I was
But you
just
kind of
thinking.
start learning that it's just that growth, and then seeing a character grow, and then of course you have your twists and turns in their story. That's different.
I was just thinking, like what you're talking about, that weird, like Spider-Man, Batman. And I was like, but what about the Avengers? I mean, it's the Avenger, and I was like, no, like half of the Avenger movies is them fighting each other, and then they're like, we team up, we're the Avenger, and then it's like 3 movies later, it's a civil war. They're constantly fighting each other,
Yeah,
and then
yeah,
they get to the end, and they're like, all right, we beat it, Thanos, and then like half of your good guys are bad guys now. Scarlet Witch is evil, and you're like, what? What's going
yeah,
on? No one's for anybody.
yeah,
It's a free for all, and so that's the. I mean, I love the Marvel movies specifically because I guess it's relatable. It says a lot about me and my personal life. It's like I don't have any friends. I like this better.
Yeah.
But that's cool, man. I didn't think about it because I don't know much about the story, but I did notice that a a lot of my friends have tried to convince me to watch some anime. There was one I watched recently that came out. I think it came out on Netflix, and I'm trying to remember what it was.
Was it Cyberpunk?
No, no,
Okay.
it was a superhero one, and it was a take on the event like Marvel, and they had I'm hating myself for not remembering what this is, but it was a recent release, and it was the same guy who wrote what else did he write? Oh man, I'm totally blanking. Anyway, so it's this kid. He's a superhero. His dad's a superhero. His mom's a superhero, but his dad is like the Superman of them, and he ends up being not a good guy. He slaughters
Not
the entire
Invincible?
Invincible. That's it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That one. And I was blown away on how good that was.
I was blown away just because it's American writers, and I was like, wow, that's
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
cool.
They did a great job. And see, that was the first taste of like sitting down and finishing. I mean, would you consider that anime? I mean, the style to me
Um,
felt like anime, but it's probably not the same theme.
it's not as the same, but I mean, damn, I mean that makes it up a good. I mean, that show was. I mean, to me, when I first saw it, I was like, okay, I don't know, it's gonna be. I don't know how they're gonna pull it off, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Just because anime has some of it has more depth, like in their shading, so they kind of look that 3D like
Yeah, yeah.
shell shading. And then you get all these crazy backgrounds that look like they were painted, and you're like,
Yeah, this
and so
doesn't.
when you see this one, it's more like just flat colored,
Mhm.
like what we're used to as kids, just like straight up just cartoon.
Yep, that's what I was
But then
thinking.
there's blood, and you're like, oh
Yeah.
shoot, And then the story was great. I mean, I knew of Invincible, I just never read it. I
Okay, yeah.
always saw the covers and comic book covers and all that, and I just didn't bother to read it. And I'm like, oh man, I missed out on something good to read. Um, but I love it.
Yeah.
Same thing with the boys. The boys was a
Oh,
great
I didn't
adaptation.
watch that one. I watched the live action. I didn't watch
Well,
the
no, I mean like the boys live action from it being
oh yeah, yeah.
that's like another comic book I didn't read, and that was cool too.
That was phenomenal. I loved The Boys. But
Yeah.
they did do an anim not anim a
Animated,
cartoon
yeah.
animated. I want to say I was trying to figure out what word. They did one of those. And again, I think and I've had this conversation with friends. I anything animated that's serious, I've never been and this is one of the reasons why I've kind of veered away from anime is it for me the only time I watch anything that's animated if it's funny. Like I watch Rick and Morty or Bob's Burgers. Like that makes
Right.
sense to me.
Yeah.
When it gets serious, it throws me. It almost is off-putting. So I'm like, I don't know how to take this because it feels different.
Yeah.
But I watched the Sandman series and they did an animation one, but it was
Oh yeah.
very artistic, and I was
Yeah.
like, okay, this is up my alley. And since I've never took the time to watch anime, the stuff you're describing, like the backgrounds look painted and the shading's different. I thought they all kind of look like Invincible, and so I didn't realize because I never spent the time to do that. Um, if there is a, you're saying that there's like a totally different art style to it. It's a lot more in
Yeah.
depth. It looks a little bit more intricate when it comes to it, and that reminded me the first time I saw an animated thing that really blew my mind was Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse,
Yeah.
and the way they changed styles throughout the
Yeah.
movie, where it
Yeah. That was
almost
cool.
felt video game-ish, then like it was just the way it switched. I don't even know how they did, but that movie blew my mind as far as artistically done. I was lost. It was so good. It
Yeah.
was one of the best pieces I've ever seen. Um, but yeah, man, what did you think about that? Would that be considered um, similar to the anime, the way they did Into the Spider Verse, the way that
I would say
art
like
style?
the story wise, because you did get that, like the teacher and
Mhm.
student, because that's also an anime, like teacher and student kind of thing,
Okay,
and then student kind of overcoming those obstacles and actually impressing the teacher, and getting to that goal. That is a huge theme in most of these animes too, that you'll see sometimes. um and so in those aspects, yeah, you also got the emotion to it, his drive, I mean, his uncle dying and all that. So
yeah, yeah,
a lot of that groundwork for sure. I mean, they had a lot of style. It's just that one's kind of hard to compare it to anything, just because it was literally a lot of comic book styles like mixed
Yeah.
into a blender and came out perfect.
Yeah, it was
uh,
it
it was
was a home
wild.
run. Yeah, it was
Yeah.
good. Hey, man, I wanna change gears a little bit. I wanna ask you a question because I think about this, and I've had a few conversations with artists about this, and so I always kinda wanna know, in I mean, you could lie to me for sure, but, was there ever a point in time, because you've been doing art for a while, that you sat back and you're like, "Do I really wanna keep doing this?" Did you ever hit a moment where you're like, "Do I wanna keep going?" Or were you just full steam from the get-go?
No, there was one time, and I always bring it up here and there. It was in middle school, and back then in middle school, what I was drawing then was these alien, the '90s alien with
Oh, yeah,
just like
yeah.
those pill eyes, green head, and I was kind of drawing them in different styles. Like I had a Chucky alien that looked like that, South
Very
Park
cool.
alien, and so I was doing that, but it was just very flat, simple. And a lot of my friends liked it, and they would always hover around and just like, "Oh, that's cool what you're doing." And then I was doing other little small stuff, and then this new kid shows up, and he had stuff in the McNay, and he busts out his portfolio, and
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
legit just straight up comic book. Like if McFarlane just walked in the room
Yeah,
and have
yeah.
like kids sketch of an alien. And literally he did draw McFarlane stuff, but it
Oh,
looked
wow.
like his style, but me as a beginning artist. And so like when I saw it, I was like, wow, what have I been doing the last few years?
Yeah, no
I was
joke.
like, I don't know if I want to do this. I was like, maybe I was just having fun with it and being a comedian with my style. So I literally stopped. Like after that day, I went home and I was
Wow.
just like, you know what? Maybe this is not for me. Maybe I thought I was because now everyone was focused on him and stuff. And I think I even had one friend who's like, "Oh man, think you have a challenger here." I was like, "You won't." I was like, so I had those kind of comments.
Yeah.
But what I ended up doing, the way I got back into it, I think I stopped drawing for a month, and then I was kind of bored in a classroom. And usually when I get bored, I was like, I want to draw, and so I forgot, we were watching a film or something, and I kind of talked to him and I was like, hey, what tips do you have to improve? Like I want to draw stuff. And he's like, well, just draw what you like. He's just like, it's not a bad thing, but you can get a reference of what you like and try to see if you can mimic it. And
Yeah,
then once
recreate it.
you're able to mimic it, try to do something else that you wanted to do, but in that style.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, okay. So I was like, at that time I had an Alien comic book or Predator comic book. And I was like, okay, so I should just draw what's on the cover. And so then I started just like, okay, using a reference drawing. And I literally did it to that film and it looked awesome. So I showed him, he was like, hey, look, check this out. And he was like, hey, that's pretty good. So then that was just pencil. And then
Yeah, yeah.
from there, I was literally drawing Aliens and Predator after that. And then I went into
Yeah, yeah.
Spawn, and then so I was trying to and I think that's why I like after Spawn, I ended up doing ink. So I went from like pencil line work to just ink because I loved how McFarlane did his like jagged edges and
Yeah.
his shading, his like just his cross hatching too. And I was like, okay, well then I'll do that. And I think eventually from there I kind of pulled away and I was like, okay, like I want to draw this. And I would just add the whatever I practice and learn. It was kind of more simplified. I was like, okay, I know how to draw a head now.
Yeah,
I have
yeah.
to look that way. I can make sure where the line goes and where the shading is going to go in ink. And that's kind of how it took off. But
Cool.
ever since then, I haven't felt about giving up. It was more like I think from that lesson, I wanted to learn more. I was like, what is out there? What's
Yeah.
my next goal? And it was comics. So then I wanted to learn digital, and that was another goal of mine during that time. And then trying to find that happy medium after high school was that trying to see like, okay, I like ink. Maybe I'll try acrylic. I even tried spray paint. I think I tried almost
Dude, I
every
did too. I did
medium.
too. Yeah, I actually didn't
Okay.
try I tried spray paint, for the first time because we would do those live shows, and
Yeah.
I was next to Soup Laws, and I
Yeah.
was like, "That's amazing."
That's
He's like,
another
"You should
story
try
too.
it, man. You should do you have a Soup Law story where you're like,
Yeah.
how's
Yeah.
he how in the hell is he doing this?" Like, I'm like,
Yeah.
"How's," and he's like, "You try," and so they told me about TPY and going down. So I went down and I spent a hefty amount on spray paint and nozzles, and I get a shot. And I was like, "Oh, I'm awful. I'm just gonna stick with what I'm good at." I was like, "This is not.
Yeah.
It takes a lot." I was like, "If I start a whole new medium now, I'm gonna have to buckle down and just ruin canvas after canvas for like a year now because it's not like painting. I don't know. What's your Supla story? We were all of a sudden. 'Cause I got to get him on the podcast. I want to talk to him because I don't know.
Yeah.
That was
He's
one of the
super
times where I was like,
super great guy.
maybe I should quit painting after I saw him paint. And I was like,
I mean,
I should
he
probably
he
pack it up
probably
now.
he probably has more. He probably has other tips and tricks, just art wise
Yeah, yeah.
or any technique wise. Because I I met him after high school at an art show, Art Slam that we had. And this was at the White Rabbit, and I was recommended to go there because they said like, oh, they have theme shows because I was doing a gallery. I mean, Brick didn't exist, but Blue Star did, and there was a few other random galleries, and there was Craig Patterson, who's a local artist here. He had I don't remember the gallery name. He turned his house to a gallery.
Oh, cool.
But whenever time I think about it, I was like, how would you turn your house to a gallery? Because his furniture would all be gone.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I started realizing when I started looking around, I was like, oh, okay. So he made a wall here to hide that. His
Oh,
couch is on
okay.
wheels, and he would, I guess, run it downstairs. I don't know how he did
That's
it
interesting.
downstairs.
Yeah, that's cool.
And so I was just like, oh, okay, that's cool. And then he's the one who told me, he's like, hey, there's this show you can go to, because everyone in there had like, abstract and other stuff, and I was doing like random, just what I've been doing.
Yeah, yeah.
And so I go to Art Slam. It was the first show, and I see Sue painting on the White Rabbit wall, and I was like, what the heck is this? So I was like,
Yeah.
so there was kind of like that moment again with the whole student
That
back
was
in
that
middle
was
school
I
moment.
had the
But I was
same
just like,
thing.
whoa, I was just like, this is different. So then, but I had learned, I was like, I'm gonna talk to him and
Yeah.
ask him any tips. So I ended up talking to him, and as these shows went on, I ended up talking to more, and then like we kept feeding off each other. But I remember one tip he always gave me, because I always told him like, man, how do you make it look like good from that distance? He's like, here, I'll tell you a trick. Like, look at it up close. What does it look like? I was like, just blobs.
Yeah,
And I
yeah.
was just like, so when you stand back, I was like, well, the full picture. He's just like, but can you see there's like little techniques or mistakes? It's not really detailed. It's just fuzzy
Yeah.
from the nozzle. And he's just like, I'm actually creating an optical illusion is what it is.
Really? Oh,
And
that's crazy.
he's like, I'm thinking of how it's gonna look from afar, but not from a close. He's like, so it's different from drawing, because drawing, you're like literally trying to look at
Yeah.
every little line detail or anything.
Mhm.
This, in his way, is like I have to kind of see it from a far perspective. And I was like,
That's nice.
oh, okay. So I was just like, yeah. He's just like, so you just have to trick them to make it seem the full picture, because when you see it from afar, everything blends
Yeah.
in, because he's not in there doing little lines or spraying there. He's actually just doing a big wave and going. If you've seen him paint, you can
Yeah.
kind of see what I mean. So I was like, oh man, that's a really cool idea. I didn't think about that. So I started applying an artwork where if I messed up on a line, I would hide it, but kind of make it look like it was supposed to be there
Mhm.
in a
Yeah, I've
way.
done
And
that
then I
multiple times.
started, because through him, I was like, I'm gonna do spray painting. So I told him like, hey, when he was doing at Crova shows, can I spray paint with you every night? I just want to get into this. I realized it was super expensive after a while. You're
Yeah.
running
That's
$12
where
a
it got
can,
me.
$18 a can.
Yeah,
I was like, but I need like 20 colors
I
because you
know.
can't change a dark red with another red. I was like, you have to buy the shade that is the dark red
Yeah.
to make it
Yeah.
darker. But it worked
It's an
out.
it's expensive to mess up. That's
Yeah.
where I like I said, I tried it out for a little bit. I actually just finished a piece where I learned a few things from it, but I'm very particular on when I use spray paint, when I don't. And it's normally to just add a different kind of texture, or a different style of sheen. Or if I want something I did a piece recently where I want it's like an acrylic piece that's um like a fine art, but I wanted like graffiti style over the face of it, like someone's
Yeah.
vandalized it. And so I'll use it for stuff like that. But other than that, I'm never touching. I'll leave that up to the professionals. I'm never touching spray paint. It was so
Trying to see if I can
expensive.
find it, because I have one painting that I loved it. I just didn't like the expense attached to it,
Me too.
and I'm like, I don't want to do this. But when I was doing it, I really liked it. It's just I couldn't pursue it, but I had one. This is one of them, but I kind of like how it came out. I'm gonna see. Hopefully, the camera catches it too.
Okay.
But this is a rhino
Oh,
piece.
yeah. Rad. Okay.
But it's spray paint. You can't probably not see it because it's not focusing on it unless it's probably
I mean,
just the lighting.
it was at first, and then it kinda went
Yeah,
blurred, but yeah, that's, it's still way better than
yeah.
I
No,
mean, I
it was great.
that's legit.
I enjoyed it. I think the only time I use spray paint now is just to paint sculptures.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah, I'm like I said, I'll use it for specifically for it to look like,
Yeah,
vandalism or something like that, but
yeah.
hey, man, I got one more question for you because 'cause I'm curious about I've been thinking about this topic because 'cause it's been hot in the news for a while, and I've been wanting to ask all my artist friends. With the new, AI stuff coming out, not with just, like, the Chat GPT where you can just talk to it and people are using it to, like, "Well, write me an essay about George Washington and this day," and it gives, like, a thorough, like, legit essay, and people are like, "Oh my god, this is gonna change industries all over the place," but then when the art one came out, obviously, it wasn't perfect, but it definitely online world, people started to take a step back and go, "Whoa, hold on, what is this?" Um, and again, it wasn't like there's this picture that a bunch of artists that I follow started posting, and it was um, like "fu AI," but it was a middle finger, but the middle finger, like the hand with the middle finger, had like 7 fingers instead of 5 because it's AI.
Yeah.
So it was kind of a play and joke on it, but it seems that people are legit nervous. Have you what's going through your head? Like what happened like when you first heard about AI imagery art and people can just type in, you know, make me Picasso themed or Rick and Morty themed this, and then the thing pops out a very decent version. Has that set you back on your heels at all?
Um, Not particularly. I actually, when I heard it, I was like, I want to see this in action to see if I can ask it to do something that maybe if I'm envisioning it or
Yeah.
putting it out there, let's see what it comes out with. Um, I don't think I had success. I did have like some cool reference photos of random stuff,
Okay.
which I think one of them I ended up using to draw a reference point for, and it was just like some rabbit girl. It wasn't really like anything comic book related, so I was like, okay, but it was just like all these things. So I was like, hey, I can change this around because I kind of saw what I was trying to look for, but I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna grab this headpiece of it because that's all I want. I was like,
Yeah.
that's kind of cool, but um maybe to gather ideas, I would say that's
Hmm.
cool, but I just don't fully understand the mechanics because I know there's people saying it's stealing 10, 20, 30 reference photos from other artists and smashing it into each other to make it work.
Yeah.
um I didn't have any success making a cool artwork where I'm like, man, this thing's way better than what I can do, but I have seen artists, an actual artist who's legit in the industry, especially in the film industry, actually request something from it and create beautiful shots. And he kind of had a conversation about it. And I don't even know how he was able to do that through AI because they came out insane. He had some like medieval armored Marvel characters, and I think he did medieval armored baby characters, and they look great. It looked
Nice.
like it was almost his style because
Yeah.
he does it kind of like that fantasy computer art. And it almost looked like it, and I was like, wow, I thought it was his artwork when I saw it, and I was like, oh, but then he started talking about AI. I was like, oh, okay, so it's not, but you can kind of tell some of the differences, and I
Yeah.
know it can be fine-tuned, and it could be a problem, but I feel like having those conversation of how it's being utilized, if it's being utilized, hey, we need like a reference of something.
I didn't even
Because
think about that. That's
I
a
know
it's a
a lot of people
cool
do it. I
tool.
mean, even myself, I would either look like, hey, I need a reference of either Spider-Man or something, like I just need
Yeah.
to see what he looks like or how his arm looks
Mhm.
when he's doing a certain pose, or anything. And I know people do that. It's just making it your own that's where it comes into play.
Yeah.
Because I use reference except for one friend. I met one guy, not the one from middle school, but I met a friend in high school. That was a whole weird thing, but just to give you a quick snippet, he was really, I don't know what mind he had, but we were watching X-Men. It was back when X-Men was around. It was X-Men Apocalypse,
Okay.
And I
Yeah.
think there was an episode where Apocalypse came out, and the following day we were in a class and he started drawing something. I was watching it because we didn't have cell phones back then, so you couldn't look at a reference. And he was drawing it, and he drew Apocalypse as if as if he was got the reference photo from the cartoon show and added it there. And I told him, I was like,
Wow.
"Where'd you get this image from, or where'd you get the reference point for this?" He's like, "Oh, it's like it's from last Saturday." And I was like,
Oh my. So he's got
"But
a photogenic memory.
yeah, he had a
Yeah.
photogenic
Yeah.
memory," and I was like, "Oh,
That's
cool."
awesome.
He was cool, but I feel bad because he's really good. Up to this day, he still is good, and I'm still trying to push him to go out there to be out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah. No
Um,
doubt.
but he was really good at doing that. But then he also had the techniques down, the shading done, and any medium he touched, he pretty much did it. He was doing MS Paint, Photoshop. But I asked him like, "Hey, why don't you pursue this as a career, or at least something on the side?" And he was like,
Yeah.
I'm just doing it for fun. Like
Yeah.
I don't really care about it. And so that was his attitude. I was like, what? And so it left me
Yeah.
puzzled. I'm like, but you're really good. And I was like, especially with that photogenic brain. I was like, there's so
That
much
thing's
I
gonna
can
come
if
in
you
handy.
can use that. It
That's
would
gonna come
come
in
so much
handy.
handy. And recently now he has reached out like, hey, I want to get into it. And so
There you go.
I think slowly he's trying to, but I'm like, man, I was like, you probably would be further in this past the San Antonio scene, but I don't think he
Yeah.
realizes it.
That
Hope
might
one
be
day
it.
he does.
Oh, I hope so. I've met a few artists like that. I know some of them like that that are like, no, no, no. This is I'm just doing this for fun. And I think I've had conversations with them, and I think they get to the point where they're maybe a little bit more worried that it it'll lose its lackluster if they start making money off of it. I've had friends who've painted paintings, put them
Yeah.
up in shows before, and people been like, "Hey, I'd like to purchase this. How much?" And he's like, "No, no, no, it's not for sale." I'm like, "Dude, you should at least what are you gonna do with all these?" You know, and so
Yeah.
I think people feel like it loses something in their art if they're, starting to do commissions or starting to do shows where they're selling it. And I think people get a little bit weirded out, which in fine. If this is for you for fun or you want to give them away or however you want to do it, that's cool. But if you're that talented, I mean,
Yeah.
some of us out here have to use references.
Yeah.
Like we're not as near as lucky to have a photogenic memory.
Yeah.
But that was the thing, and that's what I kept hearing from artists is they were like, "Well, look, if this thing's going on the internet, scouring people for their style artwork and then using it to create other art." I think the background people were going like, especially if it's digital, um, since digital's blown up, been like, "Hey, there's this guy I follow, I forgot, it's like SKAD art or something like that, and
Mhm.
he takes like Star Wars imagery or Marvel imagery and puts them over and does its own paintings that look like medieval Renaissance paintings, but it's
Mhm.
like Star Wars characters mixed in, so it looks the same style as a Renaissance, um, but it's Anakin, stuff
Yeah.
like that. And I think people are starting to go like, well, what if I spend 3 hours making that piece of art, and then some kid in school gets bored and goes Anakin as you know Da Vinci's David, and boom,
Yeah.
it's right there. And then like, well, all my work is so it's almost the same thing as like when people are like, well, when cars and trucks are automated, all these truck drivers are going to lose their job. I think a lot of artists are going. I actually might end up losing my job too. Now that this thing can literally create anything you want, and the better it gets so quickly, um, maybe it actually does it better than we can do it. And that's why I wanted to ask about the AI thing. Have you thought about that? Been like, well, someone's going to be like, paint me instead of a Whataburger cup, paint me a Sonic cup in Taco Boy style, and then boom,
Right.
and then they have it, and with nothing other than just
Right.
typing into computer. I mean, does that make you nervous at all? I'm not trying to
I think
scare
I
you or
think
nothing.
I
These
think
are
it could
things that
go
go through
both
my brain.
ways. So I know the technology. I mean, time, of course, is money.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, but I feel that even without AI, that still kind of happens where, and especially been a few artists where they point out other artists, oh, this guy copied my style
yeah.
or the same painting, or change it around and be like, hey, I was doing this theme. I have this theme going, and they kind of copied
They
what
just
I'm
went on.
doing.
They
And I
bit
have
the other
seen that
artist.
before where I'm looking at the art. I was like, man, it looks oddly similar, just different kind of
Yeah,
hats
yeah.
and outfits, you know? So I mean,
That's
it
true. I
can
didn't think
happen
about that. They're
traditional.
already doing it. Yeah,
It can happen traditional, except the only thing with AI is that they can push it in literally 3 minutes and made me create
Yeah,
like 100 art pieces in
I know.
in one day or 1 hour. And I think that's where it kind of gets kind of funky because they can do that, especially with people spending their time doing hours into it, or
Yeah,
and someone just writing a few words and done deal. I think that's where I find it's kind of cutting that time, and I know technology is just growing, and I don't think there is even a way. I know that there's maybe rules for AI, but I feel at some point that is the future for some industries. Just like other industries, we have self checkouts now. Now there's
yeah,
not a person there. I
that's it.
think those would be cut out. I don't until the point where that chat bot can write a perfect comic book
Yeah,
and that AI can draw it out full page front and back, then yeah, I would say that
we
whole
might be in
industry is
trouble.
gone.
Yeah.
Or even just do a film, an animated film. If an AI can do an animated
They're
film
doing
and
that now too,
movie.
man. I just
I
did
heard about that too.
a whole podcast about it where they're like, you can literally type in, "Hey, I want a movie about," and it'll create a movie, and
Yeah,
it freaks me. So here's my white pill for the whole thing. This is where I'm a little bit more optimistic because we've seen this happen where like things become mass produced and and you can buy it cheap from IKEA, and so if furniture makers aren't making their money anymore because people
right.
can get it easy over here. I think even if the AI thing took over and anybody can just go on the computer and go, I want a pastel oil painting of a kitten in a bowl, boom, and then print and then hang it on my wall. I think there will always be a market for hand done pieces. Um, at least for like what you mean, like watercolor paper. There'll be something different than going, oh, it's a print versus you can always buy a hand done piece because
Mhm.
handcrafted is still a thing today. People will spend the money for handcrafted because they
Right.
know the quality better. At least there's something, and maybe it's a little bougie, um, but people like there's something about being having handcrafted stuff. So I think art that might be that might be it because I guarantee if I took one, say this painting behind me, that would be I don't know how to describe that. Say it's one of my other paintings that I did, like a Spider-Man whipping through the city. And I just typed in this is a watercolor, these particular colors, Spider-Man from this angle, you know, print. It's probably gonna come out better than mine. It won't look exactly the same, but it might be better in some but the only cool thing is that mine's better is because it's handmade. It's literally done
Right.
by somebody. Maybe
Right.
that intentionality. I can sign my name to the bottom of it. That might be not that
Yeah.
that makes it any more valuable than what it is already, but you get what I'm saying. So
Yeah.
maybe that's the optimistic part. If you got the talent, people will pay
Yeah,
more
I
for
would
the
say the
talent.
talent too. I also feel like because there's certain artists that follow that maybe share similar traits. And I think what makes it different is sometimes it could be their personality, and
Yeah,
maybe that person to person, like, hey, he relates to me, and I also love his artwork, so it kind of becomes more of that personal feel.
yeah,
Because I watch streamers too, and I'm like, oh man, that guy's like really cool and funny. Like I like his stuff, so when I think about his painting and stuff, I'm like, oh, think about his jokes,
yeah, yeah,
and like how
yeah,
cool he is. And it was like, okay, but I also think that it may just, I know it will change the industry. But it's just I think artists will always find a way to find the avenue to be like, hey, you're buying it because it's through me, because
yeah,
either personality or style, whatever it could be. Because sometimes I know it can be replicated, but that other artist probably could replicate it differently, where the AI probably didn't see it because it's trying to replicate something that's already been done,
yeah.
not a
That's
future done.
that's a good point.
So it
I
can't.
think I think you're right, man. I think artists are naturally creative and ingenuitive. They'll figure out a way to keep doing what they're doing and make it work. It makes me nervous a little bit, but if at the end of the day, I don't think artists are going anywhere. I don't think it might slow the industry down. There might not be as many people when they go, well, what's the point of even try? Like that's the thing that freaks me out is had this AI stuff been around when I was 8 years old, I may have never picked up a pen. It goes back to your story about the guy in the classroom when you're
Right.
like, well, maybe I should quit. I mean, if a computer can do something better than me right off the bat, what's the point of pursuing this, even if it's fun? Like you're like it's,
Right.
and that part makes me nervous. It's for the next generation coming up. I hate to think that they look and go, well, there's no point in attempting to get into this industry if it's going to die off. And then in 20 years we have no art shows anymore. And
Right.
that would suck. But anyway, let's leave it on that dismal note.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's my thoughts, man. You got any optimism in that other than
Yeah, I
the
feel
people?
artists will always find a way. Just like
Okay,
Jurassic Park, they always find a way, you know.
that's it.
Um, they have so many sequels. They can do it. Anyone
That's
can. But
true. That's
yeah.
totally true. They can keep
Um,
remaking it. People still pay. I went and saw the
yeah, I
last
mean,
one,
I
so
would
I
still
was like,
see it. That's what I was saying. Like, if you have the like that personality or that need, they'll still keep coming back. I
yeah.
mean, we still
You know
watch
what?
it. I would still watch it if they come back with
Yeah.
another one. Same
I
as
actually
Transformers. I would
one of the
watch it no matter what.
one of the reasons why I watched the Jurassic Park because I was like, oh, they're bringing all the people back, and I was like, I'll
Yeah,
watch it just for that because I like goes back to what you're saying. Like I like the people involved. Yeah, dinosaurs fighting, cool. I'm all for it, but I'm like, it's nostalgic because these are
yeah,
Dr. Graham and all these, like this is cool. I'm into this. It's Jeff
yeah,
Goldblum. He said the thing again. Like
yeah,
it makes my heart warm. And so
yeah,
maybe you'd be right, and that's also another reason why we're uh got a podcast. Maybe people I might actually be doing the opposite. People are like, I really like this David guy's art. But then I watched his YouTube channel and I was like, I'm not buying nothing. This guy's an idiot.
Oh, I mean,
Um
that does happen. I've seen that happen.
in reverse. I'm actually
Yeah,
tanking my sales right now,
yeah,
instead of growing them. But no, it's me. So at least I'm honest about my stuff now, so people get
yeah.
to know me. But yeah, man, I think they'll find a way. Do you have anything major coming up that you want to tell people about? Any events that you got?
Besides
The
my
Disney
event,
one
I have
coming up.
mine event next Saturday at Brick. What is next Saturday? March 11th? Yeah,
Whatever.
March
Yeah.
11th. I just pulled up
Okay.
calendar. So yeah, that's the Disney themed show. So anything Disney, Star Wars, Marvel.
Man, I wish I was
After
there
that,
for that. I would easily be in that show.
yeah, for
Oh
sure,
man.
because it was hard to find people. um,
Oh yeah, I would love that.
but the people pulling up stuff, we were thinking like, oh, people are just gonna do the simple stuff, but now there's people pulling up like old school, like cartoons, the classics, and I was like, okay, good. They're
Yeah.
not
Cool.
just
Cool.
going with just the easy stuff. So that's always great. Then I have a bunch of stuff coming up, but I do have a few other
Okay.
conventions lined up. I did do the art for the badge for Riverwalk Anime, which is a new anime convention in San Antonio,
Oh wow. Okay.
and it's probably one of the I would say the lineup is probably one of the best I've seen. They have like I don't even know how many, but I think they have 12 or 14 voice actors, ranging from classics. From they have the original, not the original, but one of the original Goku and Vegeta, which is the still
Wow.
current ones. And then besides the other ones there too. So I'm doing that. That was a fun project. And then July is probably the most biggest thing because I have San Diego Comic Con.
Yeah, that's the cool. We never even got to talk about that, but I do that. That has tell me that's not one of your biggest dreams ever. San
It is.
Diego
I have
Comic
the
Con.
letter just hanging right over there, like
Oh
because
yeah,
they actually send you a letter when you get approved, and I was like, "Whoa, this is cool!" So I'm gonna frame this
frame
up,
it. Yeah, I was gonna say
frame it.
frame it, dude. That's amazing.
Yeah,
That's got to be such a cool feeling to go on.
it,
I mean, you've been doing this for a long time, and so to get that letter, it's like
it
getting
was.
your
I
Hogwarts
I
letter. It's
I
like the owl
really,
dropped it
yeah.
dropped it on your doorstep. You're going to
You're right. It's
Hogwarts.
the Harry Potter of
Yeah,
the art world,
yeah,
the wizard world. Yeah, I mean, it actually felt that way. And it was, I mean, the way it happened and the way it came was just so unique. So of course COVID happened. I had applied before COVID and even before that. And I know one of the stipulations you have to be published. And I was like, well, I'm not published. So
mm,
then I was like, maybe if I do other stuff, I can get published. And I think they kind of tweaked it because when I tried applying again, they didn't really have rules about being published. It just said they just needed sort of references of when you've been like mentioned in articles, like getting a bit podcast too, like links and stuff.
yeah,
And I was like, okay, well, I have references now. I have HP computers, and then I also have Whataburger, so I'll
yeah.
throw those in there.
It's that
Um,
Whataburger. That's the thing that
yeah,
slipped you in, dude.
right,
Whataburger.
right,
They got strings. They got
yeah,
great hamburgers and they got strings and ties. So that's
exactly.
a good one.
And
Very
then
cool.
I applied, and then when COVID happened, they were saying that it was just like rolling over like the people from the previous year to
Yeah.
previous year. So I was all right. And then so this last year I'd reached out because I was like, I was waiting for an email or something that say, hey, apply now. And there was nothing. So I sent an email and I was like, hey, I haven't seen the apply now. Like, what's going on? Is there a way I can apply? They're like, oh, the application deadline ended 2 weeks ago.
Oh.
And I was like, oh, dang it. I was like, well, I can't apply now. Um, but he's like, but we haven't sent it to the board of reviews yet.
Oh,
So
wow.
I'll allow you to submit yours.
That's
And I
legit,
was like,
dude.
okay. So then I submitted it. This was like, we're talking September around there of last year, or the September, or closer to October. And so I forgot about it. Like I literally forgot about it until they sent me an email in December. And it was just a random day. I got off work and my phone just beeped. And I looked at the email and I double ticked. I was like, wait, San Diego Comic Con. I was like, why were they sending me email? And I was like, oh, shoot, I applied. I was like, oh, that's probably the rejection email, because
Yeah.
I was thinking it because I seen it before.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so I clicked on it and I was reading it. And I was like, approved. And then I was like, set up. Wait. And I was like, wait, what?
Approved.
And I even yelled. I called her fiance. I was like, Sammy, come look at this. I was like, I got accepted to San Diego Comic Con. She's like, what? Yes. I was like, I don't. I was like speechless, and
Yeah,
it was a super emotional because I've been trying. I got into it,
no joke.
and
Y
it's awesome. And I didn't expect the letter to come in the same way the email came in too.
Yeah.
And made it even more official because I was like, oh, I got a letter now. So
Dude,
now
that's
that's
amazing. You're a wizard, Harry. That's
yeah,
awesome, dude. I love it. I
yeah,
love hearing stories like that, man. That's that I know I mean, I don't know what that feeling's like, but I think I know what that when you work really hard and all of a something pays off and you're like,
right,
"Oh my god. How cool is that?" But
right.
yeah. Hey, tell everybody where they can find your stuff if they don't know you already. I'm assuming they already do, but how do they find you?
They can go to my website, which would be talkaboydesigns.com,
Okay.
or Talkaboy Designs Instagram. I'm not I don't follow up with Twitter as much, but it's usually just Instagram and
Yeah.
Facebook that I'm active on. Sometimes TikTok, but not too much. I just I don't know. I just don't like using it as much.
Yeah, me neither. We're old, dude. We're getting
Yeah,
up there.
it's too
Oh,
much time. It's like, okay, I have to do more content. I don't know. I
yeah.
have to think like a movie producer. Like, okay, I want to
I
do it
know.
this way, and then I do it, and then it's like 2 views or 2 likes. I'm like,
Uh-huh.
so an hour
Oh,
gone for just
no, I thought the same thing, dude.
yeah,
I have a TikTok and I was like, I gotta record, which I need to do more, like record myself painting. I'm not very good. I have a new studio set up, so I've got to actually set up like a stand where it makes it easy, so I can just time lapse and do it. But man, putting the videos again, it's like this podcast. My wife has been like, you need to put clips from the podcast on TikTok. I'm like, that's gonna take me like an hour for 4 likes. But
right.
I'm gonna end up. I gotta figure out how to do it faster and be better at it. And it just takes practice. It's like painting.
Yeah, I have to watch videos and be like, oh, okay, that's what they're
Yeah,
doing, or
that's
understand
it.
more of the algorithm.
Dude, there's
And that
probably
was
an
a
app too that does it. It's
yeah.
probably a AI app, right? Just here's my clip, make it look cool with
They
stuff,
have
and
an
then just
AI app for that
yep,
too.
that's it. So I talked to a buddy of mine. And I was like, you know what I really need? I need like a 16-year-old TikToker that I can pay per post. Just like, hey, here's the podcast, here's my art. Just do my social media and make me look hip. You know, like
Yeah,
whatever Jonas Brothers song you got to put in the background, just do it. I don't
yeah,
care. Um, and just pay him like five. Then I was like, I'll just pay him $5 per post. I was like, a 16
yeah,
year old be like, no, I want 20. I was like,
definitely.
couldn't even afford that
And it
anymore.
was funny talking about TikTok, Instagram Reels. I was using it. There was a time I was just using it just to use it because I was like, oh, I'll just use it because I've been using Instagram. And out of nowhere, because I have a bank account where I just kind of just send my funds for art there.
Mhm.
And so it's kind of a savings account. So I don't really look at it.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so this time I was actually looking at it and I was like, Facebook. And I was like, wait, did they charge me? And I was like, wait, but it's green. And I was just like, what the heck? And I kept
Really?
going. And I was like, it was going on for like about a year. It wasn't a lot of money. It was just like
Yeah, yeah.
$7, $30. At one
That's
point there
cool.
was $80 there. And I was like, what? So that's why I didn't notice it because it was just small increments. And then I was
Yeah.
just like, why are they sending me money? And then I looked at their I Googled it, like
Yeah,
money.
yeah.
And it's like, oh, check, like it might be coming from Reels. And then I looked at my account settings. I was like, oh, it's coming from the Reels. And then it said like, oh, you qualify to get paid and to get bonuses if you post videos. And I
Really?
was like, whoa. So then I tried posting as much for 1 month, and it was a little bit challenging because of work, but I think in
Yeah.
1 month I made like 130, posting for like almost every day. I think it maybe Monday through Friday I had like 5 videos a
Yeah.
day. But I was only doing that because Procreate records you like drawing. So then I was like, oh, this is easy. I
Oh, I
could
didn't
just
think
do
about
that.
that. That is easy.
And
Yeah.
I'll just dump that in there. Maybe one of them will catch in there. And
That's
then here and
genius.
there I would post random stuff that just goes on, like animals, and I was like, I'll just
See,
throw it in the mix.
this is why I can't hire a 16-year-old TikToker to run my social media because Facebook's already paying them. I'll never be able to hire
Yeah.
anybody if they're getting paid just to post their Fortnite videos.
But yeah,
Anyway,
those are big.
one one day I'll get there.
Right.
Maybe not, but we'll see. I might be a TikTok. I've just now did the YouTube thing. It's a little bit at a time. Move from
Right.
audio podcast. Now I'm a video podcast, so I'm moving up in the world. Give me another year, I'll be all over TikTok doing a dance or something. Who knows?
Right.
Dude, I love talking to you. Hope you enjoyed it. This was a fun time. Man, good luck with all the stuff. That event, that Disney one's, I'm really kicking myself that I don't live there anymore. Because I really would like that. I might take what you're doing down there and just try to work it up here a little bit. Because I've been really thinking
Yeah.
about the art festivals. But again, I was like, well, my fine art, it's no one goes to an art festival to drop like $800 or even over 100, but they love Prince. And so I think this coming up, I'm just gonna lean hard into my nerd culture stuff and Prince and because not many people do it up here. So I might
Yeah.
go really hard into that.
Prints are big. I mean, they are big here. I think stickers too. I think prints and stickers are my
Is that your big
main
one?
big ones, especially stickers. I mean, they're like low price, but people like prints, and I do try doing specialty prints, and I would educate them like, oh yeah, this one's different from this one. You can tell the difference, like put them
Yeah,
side by
yeah.
side, and people would be like, oh, okay, I see what you mean. I'll take this one. And
Oh, cool.
so
I
I've
didn't
been
think of
trying to
that.
do that to kind of like, hey, like, because it'd be like, well, why is that one 10 and that one's 30 or 20? And I was like, oh, if you look at it, I mean, this costs more to make, but the
Yeah, yeah.
quality of it, I was just like, it almost looks like it's a digital piece, but it almost looks like I actually drew it,
Yeah,
but not
yeah. That's
digital, so
yeah, yeah.
with that type of ink and paper. So that's been working out when I usually try to educate them about that.
That's cool.
So I've been looking at different types of paper I can print on and make it look unique or different. So that way it like separates gloss or matte photo paper to something that's like different.
Yeah, I have to look into that. All mine's about the same on the print. The print. I have a buddy of mine actually lives in St. He does all my prints for me, and so he runs that whole part of the business. Um, and so I'm every time I get one, I don't even know how he does. I don't know what he uses, but it's really good quality. And all my Etsy reviews are 5 stars, so I'm just gonna let him continue doing what
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
doing.
Yeah,
But
keep
this year,
doing it.
I'm gonna lean heavily, a lot more heavier on doing prints and stuff. But anyway, man, it was good chatting with you. I'm gonna toss you
Okay.
off the side and sign off real quick.
Okay.
Just hang tight real quick. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining this episode of the podcast. Had a great time. Learned a ton about anime and got to talk to somebody about art and reminisce about San Antonio, which is really cool. But if you want to follow me for the podcast, you can go on Instagram. It's Pardon Will Pod, and on Twitter. I think I'm gonna not use my Twitter the podcast anymore. It's pretty much just me. So you can follow me at Pardon Will Art on Twitter and Instagram. And if you want to like and subscribe on the YouTube and Rumble and all that cool stuff that helps me out, makes my ego inflate a little bit, makes me want to keep doing this. So give me a review, even if it's bad. Be like, this podcast sucks. I think that helps the algorithm. So thumbs up, do all that good stuff. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, and yeah, I will catch you on the flip side. Bye.